So today we're going to take a look at 3 of my go-to tips and tricks for spicing up what could be a very generic and bland power chord sequence. For the sake of today's study, we're going to keep it super straightforward and focus on an A power chord, so 5 of E, 7 of A. To a D power chord, we're going to use 5 of A, 7 of D. And a C power chord, 3 of A, 5 of D. Super straightforward, so let's take a look at tip number 1 to inject and infuse a little bit of spice, and that is the use of the slash chord. The idea here is you take the lowest tone of the chord that you're playing and you alter it with something else. Now, really by the letter of the law, there's no hard and fast rule about what note you should be changing it to. But for today's study, we're going to move it down 1 semitone. So in guitar speak, that's down 1 fret. So for the use of an A slash chord, so it's now going to be an A slash G sharp or A flat, we're going to be moving the top finger, so the first finger, down 1 fret to the 4th fret. Notice how the pinky, and I've deliberately used that by the way, so I'm using my pinky as a way to get a little extra space when I pivot my finger like that, but the pinky stays the same on the 7 of A. Creates this cool little sound. If you isolate that sound on its own, it does sound fairly dissonant, which is great because you just add in a little bit of flavor. My advice would be make sure that you do lean back on the original chord itself. So it's all right inventing, it's okay to invite that level of dissonance, but do resolve it from time to time back to the tonic chord. And that just lets everybody know it's okay. I know what I'm doing. I'm not just completely playing out of key. A couple of ways that I would use this chord, which I'll demonstrate, is as a means to travel between the next chord. So it's a great tool to add functionality, and in music speak, a little bit of voice leading, which basically means how you get from one spot to the next. So we can use, for example, from the D to the C chord, we can use that slash. So we can take the top note, move it down to the 4th fret of A as a great means of connecting a little bit of chromaticism here. The 5, 4, and 3, like this. You can hear that gelled them chords quite nicely together and just adds a little bit of cohesion to the chord sequence. The other thing that I would think about as well is using the chord on like an offbeat. So we'd invite some syncopation, and basically that means you play in between the normal downbeats of a bar. So typically 1, 2, 3, 4, playing between the spaces of those beats is where you're going to create some cool rhythmic friction and energy. For example, if I was to play the slash chord on the and beat of 4, it'd sound a bit like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's move on to power chord tip number 2, and that is the added 9th. So really, we're going to add in the 9th note above the root tone. So in a typical power chord, you only have 2 notes, a root note. So in the case of an A power chord, that's an A, and the 5th, so 5 notes up from the root note, and in this case, it's an E. Root, 5th. Now, intentionally, I guess, really, stylistically speaking, that's quite a cold and harsh sounding chord. It doesn't bring a lot of vibrancy or a lot of color like you may do with like a major 7th or an altered chord, for example. But that's kind of the point of it, really. It's a no-nonsense, tough speaking chord, which is often used in harder, more heavier styles of music. It's got a thud to it, it's got a thump to it, and it's more about the attitude really rather than the technical qualities of the chord. However, by adding in the added 9th, you do start to include, I think, a welcome degree of color to the chord. So in this case, we're adding in the 9th fret of the D string, and it is completely coincidental that it's on the 9th fret. That has nothing to do with the added 9th. It's just literally 9 notes up from the root tone, in this case, a B. So you may hear it often referred to as an added 2 as well. It's just to do on the compound, whether it's an octave, just it's the same thing. Don't get too bogged down in that. Now this chord automatically speaks to me in kind of a Foo Fighters kind of way. It often makes me think of Dave Grohl. He uses and leans on that chord a lot, and you may recognize it from a certain Police guitar riff. Trying really hard not to get demonetized. So for me, the application of this chord is about combining strokes and strums, but also arpeggios. Really opens that door to start to arpeggiate the chord and just play off that added ninth, and really just highlight and underscore the fact that it's there. So if I was to kind of play around with adding strums and arpeggios, it'd sound a little bit like this. Finally, tip number 3 to spice up some what could be very generic and bland power chord sequences. And this is what I like to call the drop D slide. So we're going to take the low E string of our guitar and tune it down 1 tone to a D. Tip within a tip, so tipception. You could play the open D string and the low E string, tune it down until they both sound the same if you don't have a tuner handy or available. What's cool there, you could start to hear the notes go from dissonant, dissonant, and started to align. And that's a really good thing for your ear to get used to and develop some aural skills. So here we are, we've now got this note down tuned 1 tone to a D. Cool thing about this then, because we've tuned the note down even lower, it does have more low end, so it tends to give you a little bit more of a gut jab. It's a bit more thuddy and punchy, so when you hit the strings, oof, it really does add a lot of punch. The other cool thing is, because we've tuned it to a D, you've now got an automatic power chord using the 2 open strings, D and A. So you don't technically need to put any fingers on to play a power chord here. So what that does is it means when you finger your power chords now, it's slightly differently. So for our A chord, it's 7 and 7 of the low D and the A string. And if we were to translate and transfer the D and C to the same strings, would be 12 and 12 for D, 10 and 10 for C. Now, if you noticed, we could really just play all them chords using one kind of barring motion, so one finger laid across both strings. So what I say is kind of embrace that a little bit. You've got a bottleneck sort of slide, pseudo slide thing waiting to happen really. So use that as a means to bridge and connect the chords together and utilize that slide motion. So let's check it out. hours of fun to be had with that one. And as always, just make the techniques your own. Just understand them and enjoy them in your own way, so that you can have them up your sleeve when you want to inject a little bit of life. So on that note, I hope you enjoyed today's session. If you did, please hit the subscribe and like buttons and drop a comment below in terms of what you would use to add a little bit of colour to a power chord progression. And please do head over to the guitaristadam.co.uk website, where you'll find more free tutorials and you can inquire about booking some private tutorials. Until next time, from Guitar of Adam HQ, I'll catch you on the next one.